Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. On a train bound to nowhere, written by Echoing Cascade. Balaban was a Sullivan with a mission. He had tracked the Mysaurian ship where his daughter, Nisa, was being held to this faraway station. He had plenty of money, but simply not enough time to gather the strike force and formulate an extraction plan. So he was forced to look for a human mercenary, a soldier of fortune. The human species had made their triumphant debut into the galaxy many years ago. Sentient Deathworlders weren't that rare, but the oracle from the goddess of chaos, marking them as their own, certainly made them memorable. They had always prayed to her in one way or another, but after learning she favored them over all the others, they had responded with near zealous devotion. The soldiers of fortune were some of the most blatant examples of this new adoration. Former soldiers who would take on any mission as long as they felt luck was on their side. Marion found a local bar. Any human looking for work would inevitably end up there at some point, either to strike a deal or drown their sorrows. He looked around for any human displaying the telltale signs. "I'm in luck. I was told I could find one here, but you never know." He was looking at a man sitting in a corner of a bar, wearing a long trench coat, thick combat boots, clearly armed and sporting a tattoo of 5 cards under his right eye. Marion didn't hesitate. He had no time to lose and walked to the man. "Marion, sir, I need your help. My daughter is being held against her will. Please save her. Name your price." The merc put his spear down, looked at Marion, then at a picture he held of a young Sullivan girl, and pulled a coin from his pocket. "Call it." Marion's mouth went dry as he made a bet that he couldn't afford to lose. Heads." The merc flipped the coin, caught it mid-air without breaking eye contact with Marion, and put it on the back of his left hand. After a tense moment, he looked at it and smiled. "Where is she?" Marion let out a sigh of relief and explained the whole situation to the merc, who refused to give his name until the mission was over. Marion knew better than question a human's superstition. "All right, I have to break into a ship full of armed Mysaurians, find a Sullivan girl, and escape with our lives in less than an hour. How do I approach this?" He looked at the map that he had purchased and made careful plans for a discreet infiltration. It would be tricky, but it is doable. I guess I'll go with that, or..." He pulled a 6-sided dice and rolled it, laughed for a good minute, and prepared for Plan B. The Mysaurian guard was bored out of his skull. He had wanted to go to party with the bulk of the crew, but as one of the newest members, he was stuck on the ship. "Maybe I should just turn in for the night." A sudden panging startled him. "What in the 7 hells?" He managed to track the source of the sound. Someone was knocking on the door. He opened it, wondering why the visitor didn't bother to ring the bell. "Hello?" "Hi, pizza delivery." The guard was about to ask what pizza was, and the merc pulled an old-school revolver and shot him in the head. The noise alerted several armed guards, and the merc pulled a plasma pistol with his off hand. He made his way inside. He shot the first guard that rounded the corner. "Singing telegram!" Another Mysaurian leapt over the dead guards, clearly intent on closing into melee. Nowhere and everywhere, above a small white table the size of the galaxy, an old hand rolled a pair of dice. The result? Snake eyes. The merc's revolver, of all things, jammed, and he was now looking at a Mysaurian claw heading straight for his face. On the white table, a feminine hand turned one die into a 6. The Mysaurian slipped in the dead guard's blood, and the merc bashed his head in with the butt of his revolver. He holstered the firearm, pulled a short sword, and resumed his advance. He picked up a few kills along the way until he made it to the mess hall, where 2 tables had been turned over in a makeshift cover, and half a dozen armed Mysaurians aimed their plasma rifles at him. Jehovah's Witness?" At this, they opened fire as one. The merc barely managed to jump behind the food to avoid turning into a human-sized strainer. He was now safe, but to his surprise, he wasn't alone. The merc was face to face with a Sullivan girl. No, a Sullivan woman. While the sound of plasma fire continued, he took out a pick caster given by the Barrion looked at it and looked at the woman in front of him, and raised an eyebrow. Nisa? Salamans are basically blue humans with a garden world cellus, and strictly herbivores. That was it, as far as obvious differences went. Nisa took the pickcaster and looked at it. That's an old picture. Where did you get it? The merc couldn't help but stare now. She had curves in all the right places. And then there's what she was wearing. I hope, nay, I pray, and beg that I haven't and won't kill the man among the men who made her wear a French-made outfit. At least 2 sizes too small for her, too. Nisa grinned as she noticed his gaze. You know, you get me out of here, and you can do more than just look. The moment was spoiled by a Mysoran yelled, Grenade! And the small cylindrical object landed between them. On the cosmic white table, a young land had rolled a pair of 3s, but the same feminine hand flipped them to 1s. The merc and Nisa, who had shielded their faces and closed their eyes, slowly opened them and looked at the grenade. Clearly a dud. Nisa moved to poke it with a wooden spoon, but the merc stopped her. After the grenade failed to explode, another Mysoran yelled, Grenade! The merc and Nisa watched in horror the object land in front of them, and unable to leave cover, they waited for death. Nisa then tilted her head. What's that? The merc picked up the object. Looks like a... Before he could say pin, the tables where the Mysorans had taken shelter blew into pieces, killing them all. The merc peeked over the counter and shook his head. Those poor frackers. He extended his hand and helped Nisa up. In the end, it was a close affair, but they made it out in one piece. They stopped at the merc's rented apartment to fix his wounds, rearm, and grab a bite to eat. He was in the process of dismantling and replacing a damaged part of his revolver when he realized he should probably call Barrion and tell him that he had succeeded. Hello? Yes, it was a success. You could have told me the pick was a decade old, though. Behind him, Nisa stopped eating and listened to the conversation. I can bring her to you in an hour. I have a few wounds that need tending, and my combat kit needs replenishing. Nisa coughed loudly, and the merc looked in her direction. She walked towards his bed and sat on top of it. She looked at him, and then the bed, her eyes leaving no room for interpretation as to her goal. The merc turned around and resumed talking to the communicator. You know what? Make it 2 hours. The sound of clothes hitting the ground and stretching could be heard. The merc looked at Nisa again, picked his jaw off the floor, and at a very brisk pace spoke to Brian. It's been a rough day. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye. He tripped, trying to get his pants and shirts off simultaneously as he ran to the bed. The merc woke up the next morning alone, looked for Nisa all around his apartment but couldn't find her. He was beginning to worry when his communicator rang. Hello? Hello. Nisa has just arrived. I'll be sending your credits to your account now. The merc looked at his data state and whistled at all the zeros in front of the 1. Baron. She wanted me to know that you took really, really good care of her. The merc grinned, remembering last night. It's, what I do. She also wanted to know your name. They call me Law. I see. Thank you again, Mr. Law. Law began to make breakfast for himself and grabbed a coin. Law, heads bacon and eggs, tails combat rations. He flipped the coin, caught it in the air, and it was tails. Law, bacon and eggs it is. Nowhere, yet somewhere, a young man sighed. The last few years had been rather odd for Father Time. One of my youngest daughters married a human hero who is somehow best friends with death. My oldest son, and now another one of my daughters, has developed an unhealthy obsession with a human. He played with the dice on the table. Then a woman sat in front of him. She was wearing an almost transparent white dress, matching high heels, a pair of golden earrings, one of a spinning 2-headed coin, and another of dice with all 6s. And if Law had been present, he would have recognized a very human-looking Nisa. Father Time, now looking like an old man, he shook his head. Why him? The whole human species loves and prays to you. He loves me more than any other. Time, looking at the middle-aged man now, lifted his dice in the hand and watched them turn to dust. He hates you. There isn't a single decision he makes that he doesn't leave to chance, and every time he picks the opposite of the result. He has a tattoo of a dead man's hand on his face. The man changed his legal name to Murphy Law. Take the hint. Lady Luck just smiled and looked at the table. The image of law making bacon could be seen and in its surface now. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. No man thinks of me more than him. I've decided he will be my champion. Time sighed, nodded, and looked at the image on the table. The unluckiest lucky man alive. End of story.